Is here. So let's bring him in. He served as a U.S. Trade Representative under President George W. Bush. Let's start with what Kayla was talking about here. What do you think eventually happens with suddenly we're back to Europe and Canada? I was all focused on China. What's the end result here, do you think?
Yeah, I think something gets worked out. Joe, the question has always been, how comprehensive is it? Does it deal with the structural problems, not just buying more American products, which I think is likely? And finally, what is the way to keep it accountable? In other words, sometimes China agrees to things and doesn't follow through. So I think what you're likely to see is some good discussions this week. The Vice Premier is here in town. He's meeting with Bob Lighthizer, who's the trade representative now, and Secretary Mnuchin and others, and they're probably going to agree on something that deals with the balance of trade, so buying more of our products to try to reduce the imbalance of the trade deficit. And then second, probably something in intellectual property that's significant, I think, on licensing agreements or joint ventures and more. And then I think there'll be something on subsidies on the state enterprises in China, which are unfairly trading with us because they have this subsidization. So my hope is we get at some of those structural issues and create some way to have some consequences if China doesn't follow through. I think by March 1st, something will happen, Joe, and that'll enable, as was just noted, there might be a memorandum of understanding and then perhaps a meeting with our two presidents at a very high level. And kind of like we did with Europe, where there was the trade dispute was put on pause while we have continued discussion. So I think we're making progress. I think it's going to be good.
When the president declared the border wall national emergency, what were your comments?
Well, first of all, I think we need to back up a little bit. What the president proposed, I thought, was correct. In other words, he proposed a evidence-based solution to the border. He funded the top 10 priorities of the Border Patrol Zone Border Improvement Plan. And yet Democrats and Republicans couldn't get together to support that, so they supported about half of it. It was the most that Congress has ever put into barriers, ever, in any fiscal year. It's also the most we've ever put into border security generally, so it was a way to deal with what I think is a real problem along the border. But now the president is saying that's not enough and he'd like to go further. The national emergency, to me, is not the preferred way to go because he actually has the ability through Treasury forfeiture funds and through DOD drug funds to be able to add.
Ramp it up a couple of billion, but not $8 billion. Right?
Yeah, and so he wants to go an additional, I think it's about $3.6 billion through a national emergency, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how he defends it.
If the courts uphold his ability to do this, and some people think they could, some people don't think that they could, but if they do that, the entire structure of how we fund things breaks down, that it no longer becomes Congress, that it's basically a dictatorship. The difference between this national emergency and the 13 that President Obama, for example, I mean, it's a different situation, obviously, but things didn't break down with those 13 or however many W did or the president before him. They've all done them, but never in this case, right?
I think there are 38 out there now. And the difference, frankly, is that in those cases, Congress went along with it. Primarily, when you look at those were things like saying that there would be sanctions on a country like Iran or North Korea. So they're different in kind, and Congress never objected to it. In this case, there is likely to be a vote in the House that's negative, saying they disapprove his ability to do it.
Do you believe it's unconstitutional? As someone who I believe has read the Constitution, you've talked about things being constitutional. Here's a situation where Congress has clearly not appropriated the money that the president has wanted, and the president effectively has now done an end run around Congress and the hopes and dreams, or at least the votes of what Congress has said that is appropriate.
So two thoughts there. One, I don't think anybody really knows because it's a gray area. If you look at the constitutional arguments pro and con, they're based on case law that came before the National Emergency Act was put into effect by Congress. So probably he has the right to do it. And I would guess at the end of the day, I'm just speculating here, the courts will say this is a political question. It's not a question to be determined by the courts.
What does it mean to your power then?
But that doesn't mean that he should do it. I think those are two separate questions.
So you think that Congress can decide to appropriate money or for whatever, and if it's enough or not enough, the president can always just say, you know what, that's not right, I want to do it my way.
Well, yes, it shows a national emergency. And again, as Joe's indicated, there's something like 38 in place right now. There have been a number of them. The ones since
now when Congress has actually effectively decided on the issue in advance. And then the president has turned around and said, actually, no, I'm not. And what did you make of the fact that the president said, I could do this or I could not do this. It could take me some time. I mean, I'm sort of just trying to speed it up.
Quoted in the lawsuit, what he said in the Rose Garden was quoted in the lawsuit.
That doesn't help his case. But if you look back, Youngstown sheet metal versus Sawyer, I think it was, is the case law everybody turns to. That was before the National Emergency Act was put in place, which creates this ability for Congress to step in and have its voice heard. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I would guess that it'll make its way to the Supreme Court pretty quickly, and this will be a precedent-setting case. And they may well say this is a political question. You guys work it out.
So you said you're going to support Trump and President Trump and his re-election in 2020. Would that be the first time you voted for him, Rob?
Joe, how could you ask that? Yes, it would be, because I didn't vote for him last time.
You wrote in for Pence.
After the tapes came out, I said, you know what? I kind of had it, and I'm gonna write in Mike Pence.
Let me so you're supporting him this time around. Put that aside for a second, and let's say that you wanted a Democrat to take the presidency from him. Who do you think? And I don't want you, no one's going to listen to you, so it doesn't matter what you say. So you can be honest. Who do you think has a chance at this point? One of your buddies in the or gals in the Senate, maybe?
I kind of hate to give.
Like I said, he's not going to take your advice. I just want an honest answer, because I can't at this point. I can't come up with anyone, and I'm looking for. I mean, Howard Schultz is my favorite so far. I mean, do you have anybody that?
Yeah.
I mean, you got the wacky left. I mean, that is. Take your pick.
I think you're vying for a free Starbucks here, Joe.
No. Believe me, Howard's not giving me free anything. But Andrew, you didn't answer the question yet.
No, look, I think it's pretty simple.
Well, give me a name.
The Democratic Party
could win? Can Biden win? I hear there's no energy in his. It would be
somebody like Amy Klobuchar who would have the best chance of winning. It'd be somebody who is appealing more to the great middle of our country. That's where elections are won and lost.
She went for the New Green Deal because it's aspirational.
Well, she said it's aspirational, as I understand. I'm not defending her.
That's a cop out. If you either go for it or you don't. You like flying, you like meat, you like bacon, or you don't.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But I think it's really pretty simple. If the party lurches to the left, which it appears to be doing, then it's hard to win a national election. It's hard to win an election in a state like mine.
Can I say, I just want to go back to this is almost more just because I think it would be a benefit to viewers to understand the logic. You decided not to vote for President Trump the first time, in part because of this tape. So you heard this tape, and that offended you, right? How do you think about that relative to effectively everything that's happened since he became president, whether it be Charlottesville, which I believe you decried, whether it be caging children at the border, which I believe you decried, whether it be all of the investigations around Russian interference in the election, and whether it was the president or at least his people, there's 30 some odd people who have been indicted. How do you think about all of that relative to the tape, the tape using the P word, and why that was worse than all of these other things?
Yeah. First, I said it was an accumulation of things. I said that I had it at that point. But no, look, you forgot about the tax reform and the tax cuts that I had championed for over a dozen years. We finally enacted into law, and I tried to do it with President Obama, and he wasn't interested. You forgot about the regulatory reform that's made a huge difference in terms of our economy and economic growth and jobs and wages. For the first time in a decade and a half, my constituents in Ohio are seeing their wages go up. I mean, this is all stuff that I've been trying to do for years. I work with him every day. He's the one who signed my opioid legislation to try to keep these drugs out of Ohio, including, by the way, drugs coming across the southern border, which is a huge problem for Ohio. He's the one who signed my human trafficking legislation to really stop the online trafficking of women and children. And so I work with him every day.
So do you think it was a mistake not to have voted for him the first time? Do you think you should have?
No, I mean, I don't regret it. But what I do think is that it's my responsibility at this point as an elected official in Ohio to work with this administration to get things done. And we've accomplished a lot. I mean, when you look at it objectively, Andrew, when you look at the actual legislation that's getting passed.
Aren't you going to wait for the Mueller report? You're going to just throw in that, we colluded with Russia, just say it even though we don't know for sure? Yeah, a lot of mainstream outlets are doing that. But are you...
I believe the government has already said in many cases, not necessarily that he personally did, but clearly his team did. It's almost impossible not to.
They colluded with his team colluded with.
I mean, how many people have been arrested, indicted, and pled guilty already to doing something wrong here?
Wow. So you don't even need to wait for the.
He's surrounded himself with criminals. What are you talking about?
So listen, how do you survive between these two guys?
Did the Hillary Clinton campaign collude with Russia at all? Did the Hillary collude with Russia?
I'm unaware that there are people who've been people arrested.
Well, there may eventually be, but there are people that have been fired from the FBI, people that didn't have FISA warrants, people
Senator,
that.
thank you so much for joining us.
Melissa, I don't know how you put up with them. That's all I can.
I would have loved to ask you about the Trade Security Act. But
You
maybe
can't be any
we'll
stronger in response to him saying that we know that there was Russia collusion with Trump. I mean, you think that's okay to just?
I think I gave him a pretty good response there.
Voting for Trump.
I'm trying. I didn't think I had to step up.
What I love about the senator is
Almighty.
he can ask questions.
I mean, after Russia
fair questions, he can answer with fair answers. We can have a civil discussion about it. That's the benefit of this.
To ask him if you're still voting for Trump after the Russia collusion, I think is a weird question. I would wait till Mueller finishes.
Walmart, the big earnings report of the morning, currently
I agree with you on that.